Hello, everybody. Welcome to our awesome panel. I bet you guys all enjoyed our earlier Harry Mack. Oh my gosh, blew my mind. Wow, we've had a busy day so far, so let's keep the excitement going. I am so honored to introduce my esteemed panel filled with some of the heaviest hitters in our industry. Shannon Jones of Shannon Jones Law Group, Jeff Taw of Ropers Majeski, Bill Jansen, who many of you know and love, Broker Risk Management, and Renat Claire Ehrlich of Manning Cass. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you all in one place. This is the most expensive legal call that I've had in a long time. So as our topic is, eventually you'll all get sued. I would venture to say that the majority of agents in the industry, the more deals they do, the better chance off that they're going to end up in some type of litigation situation, demand situation, something that is somewhat negative and unnerving. So the idea of today's little chat, kind of live Q&A from all the agents. So I encourage you to type into the chat some questions and we'll ask our amazing attorneys here how to best navigate through some treacherous waters. What I'd like to do is kind of open the discussion with a general question. Just as a defense attorney working with agents, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that an agent can make that basically opens them up to potential liability? Let me kick it off with Renat.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is a real pleasure. And I just looked at everybody's logos. Wow, they're fantastic. When I was thinking about the 3 top mistakes to talk about today, I was thinking about what I see the most, not necessarily the silliest moment, let's call it, right? So what you see the most is something that any agent, even the most experienced, will probably have to go through during their career. So what I picked as my top is actually not recognizing that something is material. Now, you may think, okay, not recognizing something is material, we're talking about an inspection, but really not necessarily. So you're the eyes and ears of your clients in every transaction. And when something happens, we call it in the legal word a red flag. That's when you need to kind of hone in on it and recognize that that's a problem. And I've handled thousands and thousands of lawsuits regarding agents' issues, and this is by far the biggest. I'll give you a couple of examples. So for example, an agent who sells a property that the seller recently purchased, and the agent doesn't ask the seller, hey, did you get any reports? Did you get any disclosures? That's a big no-no, because obviously there could be things that the seller received he may or may not have fixed, and then he doesn't disclose. That's a really big trap. Another issue that's a big trap regarding not recognizing material issues is when you give recommendations to your clients about waiving things. So you can waive an inspection, but something really hasn't been explored. For example, waiving a city report, or in Santa Barbara, there's the zoning information report. You waive that, you say, no, it's no big deal, this is a new property, what problems could happen? Well, of course, problem happens, Murphy Law. Waiving financial contingency. In this market now, when there are multiple offers everywhere, people waive those. Obviously, you can do that. You can waive financial contingency, you can waive physical contingency, no problem, but you just have to make sure your clients understand what they're doing. You want to do it in writing. Basically, you want to protect yourself. Another mistake that I think happens, not as often, but this is something that I would put in the more silly category. It's like, oops, why did I do that? And that's a mistake of drafting. And the reason I see that mistake often is that agents obviously are not attorneys. They use the CAR forms. This is great. We always recommend to do that. They mark all the right places. It's just basically putting an X in the right place. But the problem is, then they add writing. And I could give you examples of things that I've seen. For example, an agent writing the word concurrent instead of contingent. The close of escrow will be concurrent with seller purchase of new property. What you want to do in that situation, of course, use a CAR form. In fact, if you look at the CAR forms, you will probably find a form that would help you in every possible scenario. So always first resort to the CAR form. They're basically idiot proof, if you will. Another example is I had a case that we had one agent write right of first refusal, and the other agent responded in a counteroffer with an option agreement. The agent didn't understand the difference between right of first refusal and an option. Litigation ensued, and it was terrible. All they had to do is tell their clients, look, if you want to do something, resort to your attorneys, have them draft it, or actually use the option agreement form of CAR. Another
idiot proof. I love that, Renat. I don't think that they're idiot proof because we come across many problems. And then we're all on the phone with all of you guys. Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Not to cut you off, but I want to get some other
Sure.
other top pitfalls, mistakes. Jeff, why don't we get what you see?
Well, you know, this last year, what I've seen a lot is, and which is very common, at least in the Bay Area, people putting in multiple offers on multiple properties, and which is perfectly okay just because how competitive the market is. But if you're going to do that, make sure you watch your deadlines. I've seen so many times where you represent a buyer and you put in multiple offers and you don't cancel in time, and you accept another offer, and then you have this dispute of the seller saying, you didn't cancel, give me your deposit. And you know, the deposits aren't, they're a good chunk of money with housing prices right now. So just watch deadlines, you know, and make sure that you cancel properly, that you just don't text the selling agent and just say, oh, my client's canceling, you know, because they may not see that, and then that becomes a dispute whether or not you canceled in time. And then now you have a client that has two accepted offers on multiple properties, and then you're in a bind. So just kind of watch, you know, if you're going to do multiple offers, make sure you know when the last day to cancel is. And that's something I've seen a lot lately. And sellers are eager to jump on keeping your deposit. So, you know, that's something I've seen this year a lot of.
Yeah, especially when money is tight, they're trying to make sure, or they got an offer that is well above where they think that they should have gotten an offer, and they want to capitalize on trying to keep that, for sure. Shannon, what's your favorite mistake that you see?
Can I give you my top three?
Yes, let's do it.
So welcome everybody. It's great to see everybody, by the way. So I think my number one mistake that I'm seeing right now is either not doing a visual inspection or doing an inadequate visual inspection. I looked at a file a couple of days ago, and the agent wrote on the Avid, agent does not do visual inspections. Needless to say, we're in litigation right now. Gee, I wonder why. I was looking at a file this morning and making recommendations on settlement, and normally there were two issues with this file, which leads me into the second issue. The first issue is that the agent did not do a visual inspection, and instead the agent wrote on the transfer disclosure statement on the third page, agent recommends that buyer undertakes inspections. Doing a visual inspection is so incredibly important. First of all, it's required by the code. But secondly, it also reflects the condition of the property, and it can be very, very, very helpful. So for example, if you go into a living room and you write nothing noted, and then the buyers a year later claim that there was a roof leak, and we look at your visual inspection and we go, well, there was nothing existing on the date of the close of escrow or on the date that you did your visual inspection, it gives us something to talk about and say, well, how can we disclose something we didn't know? My number two is failing to look at the TDS and the SPQ. So many times the seller prepares the TDS and the SPQ, and the seller either doesn't know how to respond to questions, and of course it's the key questions, or the seller just doesn't want to disclose, so they leave it blank. And I've got a lot of litigation right now, a file this morning that I was looking at, the same file where the agent didn't want to do visual inspection. But the seller didn't fill out any of the questions on drainage or flooding. Well, I don't really know why, because we haven't taken the seller's depositions, but guess what the buyers are complaining about? Non-disclosed drainage and flooding. And of course, in a normal circumstance, the agent wouldn't have any knowledge of that because the property was sold in July. But the agent should have caught the fact that the sellers left it blank and should have sent it back to the listing agent and said, you have got to complete this, and not sign off on it until it's complete. My third pitfall or biggest mistake is not documenting your conversations with your clients. A lot of agents give really great advice to their clients. They're doing a really fabulous job. They tell their client, for example, you know what, I see remnants of a drainage problem. You should have a drainage inspection. But they don't go back to their computer and write that email saying, I'm just following up on my advice to you to have a drainage inspection, but you told me you didn't want to do that. Are you sure you don't want to do that? So many times these cases come down to a he said, she said kind of thing, and it is very, very difficult to defend those kinds of cases. So please, 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 whether you get in your car and you dictate an email, or you dictate a note to the file, or you send yourself a note to the file, however you're going to do it, whatever you're comfortable with, please document the conversations and the fabulous advice that you give your clients along the way. Those are my three.
Yeah. Yes, and avids are Casey and Spencer's favorite topic, so they will definitely give you a big round of applause for mentioning that. Bill, last but not least on this topic, your top three, or just a top mistake that you see and that we call on all the time.
Thank you, Shannon. Welcome, everybody. We have a fabulous panel. I know all of these attorneys, and they're very, very, very well qualified to be here talking about this. My first one is read, read, read. I find agents oftentimes don't read. For example, buyers are entitled, as has been commented, to a completed transfer disclosure statement. That means all questions answered, yes answers to, or explanations of any yes answers. On a TDS now, there must be a checkbox in one of the three boxes on section 1. That's a change. Listing agents, you need to be sure there's a checkbox in one of those three in section 1 before you deliver to the buyer. When looking at offers, for example, as a listing agent, see which boxes were checked and not checked. They have consequences. Who wrote what in what blank? Who wrote what in the addendum? Read and understand all of it. I see agents just skip over it all the time. Second one is, I'm going to piggyback on Shannon's comment, and I'll say it again 3 times: document, document, document. We have, all the attorneys on this panel have had the experience of opening up a file. We get a claim. I don't do this anymore, but when I was in-house reviewing files, I would open a file, and I could tell you within 15 minutes where that case was going, where that claim was going, by how well the agent documented what was said. It's important to do the right thing. It's equally important to document that you did it so it can be proven, because otherwise it's he said, she said, and that claim is gonna cost a lot more to settle. Third is, stay in your lane. Agents get outside of their area of competence. They're residential agents, and they see a commercial transaction with a big commission and they want to go after it. I call it elephant hunting. They get taken by it. But there's a separate standard of care for commercial brokers. Rentals as well these days are very, very complicated under California laws, state law, federal law with eviction prohibitions, local residential rent control, and just cause eviction. Unless you're a qualified agent who does a lot of rentals, don't even dabble in it. And I'm going to throw in one quick fourth one. When in doubt, contact your manager or broker. Once it's baked in the cake, once it's been signed by the parties, we can't do anything with it. If you go to your manager, the manager can correct it, or get legal counsel to come in and counsel how to get it corrected. So those are my ones that I would hit hardest.
Absolutely, and the check's in the mail later, Bill, for saying that, to contact your managing broker. We are here to support all of our agents, and our managing brokers in all of our states are here to provide that support. And when we don't know the answer, we're the first person to say, you know what, let's go call Bill and Vicki, let's go reach out outside counsel, let's get another opinion, or let's bring them in now to try and diffuse the situation. So quick question from some of our agents, and I'm gonna hand this off to Shannon, because you have so graciously accepted a handful of our E&O claims. This agent has not been sued, knock on wood, yay, but he's asking, what does E&O insurance actually do for the agent?
Errors and omissions insurance provides you with insurance coverage for any negligent, or I should say any claim asserted against you in your capacity as a real estate agent. So whether you did something wrong or not, the insurance company steps up. Once the retention is paid, which is like the deductible, the insurance company will pay your defense fees and will also pay for any settlement or potential judgment within the confines of that insurance policy. But essentially, in very general terms, so long as you are acting as a real estate agent, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about in just a second that is sitting on my desk that you'll find of interest. As long as you are acting in the capacity as a real estate agent, they are going to protect you. And that is the purpose of having a great insurance company and a great broker behind you, is that they're going to provide that for you. It's a lot of comfort. Now, let me follow up on this. When I say acting as a real estate agent, you need to be very cautious about knowing what side does, what your brokerage allows you to do. So for example, if you're not supposed to be doing property management and you are doing property management, you've been told not to do it, and you get sued for that, there may not be coverage. I'm dealing with a situation right now where an agent after the close of escrow was a listing agent after the close of escrow, started working with the buyer and agreed to start making repairs to the property and manage a remodel. Well, post close of escrow construction activities by an agent is not acting in the capacity as a real estate agent. So the insurance company has said to me and to the agent, we're going to provide you with coverage for all of your acts before the close of escrow, but we are not going to cover you for your acts as a handyman wannabe contractor, because he's not a licensed contractor, after the close of escrow. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but sometimes examples.
No, examples.
In fact, Hillary, if you don't mind, I wanted to add, because
jump in.
I see that a lot all the time, where agents, they act outside of what the confines of the policy would cover. So as the advice given before, just ask your manager to find out if something is covered. For example, I've seen policies that would not cover new condominium sales, or they don't cover commercial, but they cover only residential, or the agent acts under their own corporate license. I'm not talking about your teams. I'm talking about an agent specifically within the team that has an LLC, and that LLC would be named in a lawsuit. That specific LLC may not be covered. So if you're not sure, for example, if you're selling your own property, sometimes it's not covered. Just ask your manager and be sure.
Yeah. Oh wait, I ask first, please. Don't act and then ask for forgiveness, because the dollar figures get really big. Yeah. Another question, and I'll give this to Jeff. We've got an agent who's asking, how would you suggest to explain to potential buyers that a new development project, it's 2 condos, has had multiple general contractors working on it? How would you want them to disclose it or put it in their listing information?
That they've had multiple general contractors worked on the project. I mean, just
Right.
be upfront. Just be upfront with your clients, you know. And going back to what Bill was saying was, you know, when I open a file and I talk to the agent, and all I hear is, well, this is what happened. I said this, they said this, and none of it is documented. That becomes a problem. So if you have multiple general contractors working on a project, you just need to disclose it and make sure when you do that, they understand that, and you do it, you know, you do it in writing. And that's the best way to approach these kinds of situations.
Yeah, I remember Bill early on, and I think you and Vicky do a great job of, when you provide our risk management seminars twice a year, over disclose. So how do you suggest an agent have the conversation with a seller who maybe isn't forthcoming with information, or it's hard, it feels like they're trying to pull teeth to get them to really fill in the details on the TDS, or provide, you know, receipts and things like that? What should they really instill to the seller that they do need to disclose everything?
Yeah, so sometimes sellers say, well, where does it say that I have to disclose all this stuff? Well, we can't practice law and say, well, there's this case that says this or this case says that. We attorneys know those, but where do you send your seller? Send them to the first page of the disclosure information advisory, which CAR has, and it talks about what sellers are obligated to disclose. In fact, as a fiduciary to your seller, you should be explaining to them what their disclosure obligations are and go through that document every time on every transaction. And then if sellers are still reluctant, explain to them what buyers learn during escrow. They then can make a decision whether they're going to go forward or not. But what they learn after the close of escrow, that's what they sue over. So sometimes sellers, I've heard sellers or agents say, our seller says, well, you're just trying to protect yourself. And the answer is, well, we're protecting you because if you fully disclose, you've got a better chance of not getting sued. So you have to fully disclose. And by the way, if we know that they're failing to disclose, intentionally failing to disclose, talk to your manager and you may have to just walk away from that transaction.
Yeah, we've had that conversation with agents recently, is that, you know what, you need to let this client go. Otherwise, you're just opening yourself up. Yeah. Well, there's a new, with the latest kind of companies like HomeLight or Revive, where they're providing financial services or a financial benefit to a seller to ready a home for rent, for listing and to get the highest dollar. How do you, in light of what you were saying, is not acting as kind of like the cruise director or the project manager for the buyer after the fact or the home remodel, how do we deal with the new introduction to those programs? Say you have a seller, you're on a listing appointment and the seller says, hey, the house isn't in really good shape, I don't have the cash to do it. Is the agent going to get in trouble for saying, oh, here's a whole list of companies that are out there that do this for you, go research them and pick the one that you like? Is there liability?
Well, there could be. Back in the 90s, when we were defending REO claims after the banks took over the properties, an agent, before getting properties ready to be listed, would go look at and see all the problems and then would hire repair people to make the repairs. They got into a lot of troubles after that with the disclosures. So anytime an agent is aware of how a property looks before it gets a facelift, that agent now is under an obligation to disclose that and potentially disclose the extent of the facelift, because we all see those, everybody always alleges fraud. Okay. So if you see fraud, you're always going to see it. But there's the cases that really tend to be more fraudulent, where flippers or whoever would take a property and do more of the superficial fixes, fix a crack, but not do it structurally sound, and then put a carpet over it. So if you can disclose to a potential buyer everything that exists under the carpet, if you will, what's under the paint. There was a stain, don't know if it got fixed, seller telling me it got fixed, somebody came in and repainted the house. There was a crack, I heard that it was fixed, didn't see it, I'm not a contractor, I'm not sure what they did. Hire an expert to talk to you about whether the repair was sufficient. So the more you disclose, and I always tell agents to actually describe everything literally and not try to come up with fancy words or anything, then the better you are. And Bill's right, the seller is protected too, because what we do as agents is protect our own clients. That's really what we do. So it's not really protecting ourselves. And I could give you many, many examples of sellers who over-disclosed, and then a buyer buys a property, because buyers don't care. They're in a transaction. They're so excited about the house, especially now there's multiple offers. They're happy to get the house. They'll pay above listing. They don't care. They don't even care if it appraises. They want the house. And then, lo and behold, they buy the house and they find out something's wrong. They go back and immediately they make a claim. They don't even look at the paperwork. So if you want to talk about a aha moment, that's when you go back and look at that really, really detailed disclosure that the seller or agent gave about what was the work, how it looked before, and that's key.
Right. Yeah.
Can I interject for just a second? Hillary, I think you asked two questions, and I kind of want to dovetail on what Renat said. The first question was, handling these third parties, and are we responsible for them? The Civil Code actually says that if a real estate agent, if another professional is working on a property, that a real estate agent cannot be liable for that professional's negligence. So for example, home inspectors, we refer to this all the time. If a home inspector is hired, they make a mistake, we can't be responsible for their mistake unless there is some sort of a red flag. And I think that code section could likely be transferred to a company who hires a licensed professional who is insured, et cetera, et cetera. So I tend to think that as long as we don't interfere with their work, as long as we're not supervising their work, and as long as they are properly insured, there is probably little exposure for using that kind of a company. And then I think the second part of that question was, Renat, to put it a different way, I tell clients not to use adjectives and adverbs. But I also suggest that when you are going to stage a property, or when there's going to be renovations, I suggest that agents do their visual inspection before, and that they take photographs, and that they document the before. And then if they want to update it later and say this is an amended with the after, then that's fine. But the Avid is not a marketing material. It is not for the purpose of telling somebody how great this property is. It's quite the opposite. It's to disclose everything that they know. And so I always suggest to agents, and I love this story one time of a client that did that. There was a major staging with remodel and painting and carpets, everything was done. This agent went in before, took photographs of it. When they went to transfer or give the disclosures to the buyer, the agent gave the buyer a CD with all these photographs. Well, it closes escrow, and exactly as Renat said, buyer doesn't look at anything. We get this demand letter in, and I look at the file and I went, oh my God, look at the CD. This is awesome. Everything they're complaining about was disclosed. I sent this CD over to plaintiff's counsel, over to the buyer's attorney, and I went, really? What are you complaining about? Your client look at this. Case went away. No payment, nothing went away. But it was perfect. So don't try and do inspections after, do them before.
Yeah, a lot of the agents are asking now with COVID, can we use Matterport or visual, a walkthrough with FaceTime and record it to add to the file to make it, more robust for an Avid? Would you recommend taking photos, visuals, that walkthroughs?
I do, but I still think the law allows you to do a visual inspection under certain circumstances. I would suggest you do it, have the seller leave and do a visual inspection. I do not think, I never have a problem with documentation, whether it's, walking through and taking photographs, videos, whatever you want to do. But if you are doing this virtually and you are doing it, the seller, because I got the question when COVID and the shelter in place orders first hit, I had sellers that were going through with FaceTime, and basically their agent was on the other line watching this and trying to do their visual inspection. Okay, common sense tells you that there is nothing like doing a live inspection. And, even though at that moment in time, that was the only thing that we could do until the shelter in place orders were lifted and we got more specification over what we could do and couldn't do, I just kept thinking, oh God, this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. So the answer is yes, but I really don't think that that's ideal.
I want to add something. So first of all, you have to understand that your visual inspection is extremely important because it's another opportunity for another fresh set of eyes to look at the property and note things. I've had a case where the agent was the only one who noted cracks in the front of the house. The home inspector didn't note it. It wasn't on any of the pictures. And that's what got us out, because what we were able to say is, look, buyer, you were aware of it. It was on the Avid. So don't look at the Avid as just one of these extra things you have to do. I already have to fill so many forms, and this is just another obligation. Look at it as an opportunity to protect yourself, not so much as an obligation. The second thing I wanted to mention about taking pictures, sure, whatever you do to better document, I agree with all of you guys, that's better. But we always have to think about, too, we don't want to raise the standard of care, because we don't want somebody to say, I went with Side or one of your team names because we know they do the best visual inspections, and now before you know it, you become you raise the bar, if you will, just for yourself or maybe for the entire area of practice. So certainly we don't want to overdo it in a way where people will start expecting it, but you just do it in a way where you can memorialize the best way possible. So I agree with Shannon. A video is difficult to ascertain how big a crack is, where it's located. That's why a physical inspection rather than video is better. I'm okay with photos if there's something specific you want to document, but I wouldn't go and document every single wall in a photo, because then the problem is we're creating that expectation that it's necessary.
We can't hear you.
Hillary, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Well, let me
So
just,
I was going to jump in with one quick comment while we're working on that regarding AVIDs. One of the things I see in every once in a while on the TDS, the agent checks the box in section 3, the listing agent checks the box and said AVID to follow. The problem with that is section 10 of the residential purchase agreement says that it's a completed TDS when all the questions are answered. It's a completed TDS, and you have the seller's agent's AVID. So the buyer's 5-day right to cancel or 3 days if TDS is delivered in person doesn't even start until the listing agent's AVID has been delivered. So they're leaving the door wide open for that buyer to terminate the contract later on down the road. So no listing agent should ever deliver a TDS without having an AVID attached, if at all possible.
okay. Like, let me just add that, a lot of this, I think all you guys know what to do, but I understand that, these transactions happen fast. You're walking around, you're visiting multiple properties. Just take the time to go over the forms and make sure all the boxes are checked, all the signatures and all the initials are that you have all of that. Because a lot of times you get into these transactions and you have multiple bids and you just want to get that transaction done. You kind of overlook these forms that you fill out. So just pause a little bit so that down the road, you're not having issues with, oh, I didn't check that box.
I want to talk a little bit to newer agents, because newer agents might have issues that more experienced agents don't have. So I'm going to tell you, my top advice to a new agent is, it kind of piggyback about what Bill said about staying in your lane. But it's not just, but I'm not talking about just staying in your practice area or geographical location. I'm talking about doing stuff outside what your duty requires. For example, if you go to the city and you help the buyer look at permits, or you go get the permits for the buyer and then you give it to them, because as a new agent, you really, really want to be very helpful, and you go above and beyond to try to make sure your clients like you and you do a good job. What you don't realize is that your job doesn't require you to do certain things, and when you do them, you actually you create a new duty on yourself, and then you actually have to discharge that duty properly. So I've had a lot of cases where agents, for example, would hire a handyman for a seller because the seller agreed to make repairs, thinking, oh, I'm going to help this agent, the seller, and I'm going to hire a handyman who doesn't have a license because they're going to be cheaper. And then the handyman goes in and does the work, and before you know it, they screw up something, and then the buyer has a problem, and then they sue everybody else, and then the seller says, hey, you hired an unlicensed handyman. So when you do go above and beyond because you really want to show you do more, and I'm not going to tell you not to do more, right? Because in real life, you want to help people and you always want to do more. I want you to really think about when you are doing more, you are taking on responsibilities you do not have, so make sure you discharge them the same way you would do with your other responsibilities. Don't give somebody a pack of permits and say, here's everything that's permitted. No, that's a statement. Unless you read every single permit and you know everything therein is permitted, don't say anything. In fact, have that email saying that I gave you permits that I found in the city. That's what they gave me. I don't know if there's anything more. I don't know what they say. I don't know how to read permits.
Thank you guys so much. Sorry for the audio problems, but you guys are amazing. I know we're wrapping it up, so they're going to cut us off, but thank you all. And we'll have to do this again sometime.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.